I now recognize the sponsor of the bill, Representative Biggs from Arizona, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Comer, and thank you, Ranking Member Raskin, for your input. This bill is intended to leverage technology to tackle problems associated with the sheer volume of regulatory text in the Code of Federal Regulations and the impact of regulatory accumulation. According to Competitive Enterprise Institute, in 1960, the CFR, which is the home for all U.S. regulation, was comprised of nearly 23,000 pages. Yet by 2019, the total page count had grown to more than 185,000 pages. You can pick up your own print copy of the CFR from the Government Publishing Office. The 50 titles of code span approximately 200 volumes and are revised quarterly. I'll refrain from submitting the entire CFR into the record, but I have plenty of other material to include today. The CFR is kept up to date by the Federal Register, which tracks the daily flow of regulatory action across the federal government. Mr. Chairman, I submit for the record a December 2023 Forbes article entitled Biden's 2023 Federal Register page count is the second highest ever.
Without objection, so ordered.
The article notes that the 2023 Federal Register finished with more than 90,000 pages of rules and regulations, up from nearly 80,000 pages in 2022, and only outpaced President Obama's record of 95,894 pages in 2016, was only outpaced by that. The final year of the Trump administration saw around 86,000 pages, which was up from the previous 3 years of his administration. The article goes on to make the important point: page and rule counts are not a precise measure of the impact of regulation, but the sheer volume of regulations on the books presents its own set of challenges. And I will say, I've pointing it out, both parties have the same problem. It just keeps it growing. In 2014, the Administrative Conference of the U.S. put out a guidance document stating, traditionally, federal regulatory policymaking has been a forward-looking enterprise. Congress delegates power to administrative agencies to respond to new challenges, and agencies devise rules designed to address those challenges. Over time, however, regulations may become outdated, and the cumulative burden of decades of regulations issued by numerous federal agencies can both complicate agencies' enforcement efforts and impose a substantial burden on regulated entities. I will also submit that article for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Other scholars of the administrative state have estimated that regulatory accumulation alone, not the impact of any specific major rulemaking, but just the accumulation of regulation, has stunted economic growth between 0.8 and 1.5% annually, resulting in a potential loss of $4 trillion in GDP from the 1980s through 2012. And other studies point out that associated consumer price increases disproportionately impact lower-income households. I submit both of those studies for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
That's why the Obama administration touted the success of their own retrospective review program. In an August 2016 blog, Howard Shalansky, President Obama's administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, argued that the 5-year program resulted in more than 800 review initiatives, removed more than 70 notable regulator provisions from the books, and achieved $37 billion in savings, paperwork reductions, and other benefits for Americans. And I submit that blog entitled Retrospective Review by the Numbers for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Providing regulators with new tools to strengthen the retrospective review process should be a bipartisan effort, and this bill requires the Office of Management and Budget to issue guidance to federal agencies on how to leverage technology, like artificial intelligence, in the process of conducting retrospective reviews of regulation. The bill also requires the OIRA to submit a report to Congress assessing whether federal regulations are available in a machine readout format, which is necessary to ensure that agencies can leverage technology. It also requires agencies to plan for and implement the use of technology to facilitate a retrospective review of regulations previously promulgated by each agency. Specifically, the bill is focused on using AI tools to identify regulations that are obsolete, ineffective, or insufficient, excessively burdensome, or should be improved, contain typographic errors, contain inaccurate cross-references, or are redundant, contradict, or overlap with any regulations or standards of the agency. These areas of focus track closely with the Obama administration retrospective review program discussed earlier. Section 6 of EO 13563, issued in January of 2011, required agencies to identify rules that may be outmoded, ineffective, inefficient, insufficient, or excessively burdensome. I wish this was a totally bipartisan effort right now. I'll try to look at Representative Raskin's suggestions, but the reality is, Mr. Chairman, I think this bill is appropriate as it stands, And quite frankly, it does nothing more than actually reinforce an executive order of the Obama administration that I think is actually long overdue and should be codified by us. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I urge everyone's support and yield back.
Gentleman yields back.